We are back for the third chapter of Aliens Outbreak. When we had left, Hicks had smuggled Newt on board the Benedict, which was scheduled to launch for the alien homeworld. After the Benedict had left, we also saw that the KO-14, led by Massey, was in close pursuit. Now, Massey is an intelligent sociopath who has been hired by a powerful company called Bionational to sabotage the Benedict and to take samples from the alien homeworld. At the same time, Bionational is conducting research on several patients who are suffering from the same xenomorphic nightmares. We return to the labs of Bionational. There is a man strapped to a bed who is having nightmares. 2 scientists are monitoring his condition. One of them points out that he is coming out of it. He is the survivor from the junket who has an alien parasite on him that appears to be dormant. As he begins to wake up, they tell him his name is James Mikowski, and that he was the captain of the space freighter, the Junket. They also tell him that he is in a quarantined medical facility on Earth, and offer to release his straps if he is feeling up to it. James asks if someone could explain what is happening, and tells them he would like to see his wife. We can see the executives from before are watching him through reflective panels. The scientist explains to them that the creature has lodged itself in his digestive system, drawing relatively insignificant amounts of blood. It is also growing at an incredible rate. They ask him whether the pilot knows what is happening to him, and the doc tells him that they have been having ongoing ethical questions about whether or not they should tell him, considering the ultimate prognosis will be death by chest burst. They agree that in order to effectively study the creature and its effect on him, James should be notified. As the executives are walking away from the lab, they mention that the company had already dropped hints at a weapons convention in San Diego, which has got a lot of people excited. We then head to a motel bedroom. There is a pregnant woman talking to Salvage, who thinks he is a prophet for the Xenomorphs. She says that he has done nothing but stare at her all day. This is where we start to realize she is a prostitute. He goes on to say that women are blessed as they know how it feels to be joined with another life. She gets onto the bed and asks if he wants anything else, and he says that he wants to know how it feels. Salvage returns to a secret broadcasting location, where the technician has been waiting for him. He lets him know that a couple of government suits had dropped by his shop, asking questions about the channel he had set up for Sal. Sal asks what he told them, and the tech says that he told them nothing. Essentially, if they knew what he did, they would pull his license and he would lose his military contracts. He's pretty annoyed here, as he tells Sal that he's been doing this for 3 years and has never encountered a problem, until now. Salvage pulls the curtain to reveal a xenomorph. The tech asks what it is. Sal grabs him by the face and says, "The Messiah, the Immaculate Incubation God." The tech tells Sal that he's out of his mind and that he wasn't going to risk his career. Sal flings him into the ground and grabs him by the shirt. He informs him that they are both nothing but vessels to serve the true Messiah, glorified in having been chosen for the ultimate communion. He drags him to the feet of the alien and tells him to look. When the tech refuses, he pulls his head by the hair and yells at him. He tells him that the broadcasts will continue, and he also says not to be afraid of the government, but to fear him instead. We arrive on the KO-14, where the plan is being revealed to us. Massey tells the pilot to stay back so that the sensors on the Benedict do not pick them up until after they go through gravity burn. He then heads to the briefing room, where he goes over the plan. He tells his soldiers that they are going to enter the Benedict through one of the 5 access ports. He says that they will have low-level blasters, but asks them to be careful, as although the military ships were armored, one unlucky shot could still breach the hull. They are told to hold the crew prisoner until they reach the alien homeworld. Once there, they are to purge the military computers, destroy the ship, and leave no survivors. We get to the Benedict, where Stephen has found out about Newt. He is screaming at Hicks, saying that his suspicions of Hicks being unreliable have been confirmed by this insane stunt. He asks him what he was thinking, and Hicks says that he offers no excuses. Stevens orders him to explain not just to him, but to the crew why he had brought extra weight onto a carefully balanced gravity drive ship. Newt jumps to his defense and says that it wasn't his fault as he did it for her. Stephen starts to rip into Newt, but is stopped by Hicks, who tells him to leave her out of it. He insists that the gravity balance is normal as he dumped 104 pounds of the raspberry flavoured shit before takeoff. We see Bueller saying that he liked the raspberry shit before the other grunt tells him to shut up. Now, I really feel Bueller is this story's Hudson. Rest in peace, Bill Paxton. Stevens threatens to lock him up until he can be court-martialed. Hicks cleverly tells him that he was sure the military court would also be interested in hearing how a top-secret military vessel was able to leave base without a thorough inspection by the commanding officer. We get to Easley, one of the grunts on board the Benedict, who is doing checks across the ship. He hears a message being sent by an unknown person to the KO-14. He enters one of the spare rooms and sees something that shocks him. He asks himself whether the others know about this, as he is stabbed through the neck with a piece of piping. Damn! We then see his body being dragged across the floor, leaving a huge trail of blood. The killer opens the airlock, grabs a suit, and removes the pipe from Easley's neck before putting him into the suit. Miraculously, Easley is not dead yet, although he is close to it. The soldiers on the bridge notice that somebody is opening one of the airlocks. The killer pops a grenade before opening it. We see a huge explosion go off, sending Easley off into space. Hicks arrives to see this and asks who that was. They tell him they are not sure and that he is not responding. The light from the force of the explosion causes Hicks to shield his eyes. We get back to Bio-National, where James is being monitored. He is dreaming and tells us there is a pain inside him and that he wants to live. He reaches over to one of the lab coats and grabs their gun. He shoots the scientist before shooting the reflected glass and everyone behind it. He tells us that the guards were dead and that he wanted to kill more as he didn't care. He is killing everyone that gets in his way as he makes it outside and tells a couple to exit their car. He gets in and another guard appears in front of him, which he kills by driving into him. He tells us that while death is all around him, he feels utterly alive. He is on the highway, speeding towards his wife as a helicopter cuts him off. It fires at him and he spins to avoid it. It somehow crashes into one of the buildings as he says they don't understand. This is his time and that he could not be denied. We see him pull up outside his building. He runs into the elevator and tells us that he is so close to her now. His wife opens the door and they embrace as more guards run at them. He shoots them dead as he and his wife make a break for the ship the guards had flown in. He says that they have nowhere to go and that he will aim for the sun. He turns to his right to reveal his wife is an alien and says that she is beautiful. That whole thing appears to have been a dream as we see the same events playing out again. James is shaking, reaching for the gun, but this time they were able to stop him from getting it. A growth begins to push against his ribs, and they realize the alien is coming out of him. The executive, who was watching from outside, rushes in, saying that he wants to see the birth firsthand. The expert tells him that he would feel better if he waited with him, but is told not to worry about it. The scientists are wondering what is taking so long for it to come out, and speculate whether he is fighting it. The executive is worried that James is hurting the specimen, and we see him approach. He asks what the hell he thought he was doing, and tells him that the entire project depended on him. James grabs him and says, "You want it?" He pulls the executive over and tells him he can have it, as the alien bursts out of James and into the exec. They start to make a break for the door as the executive asks for help. The scientist tells him he is exposing the entire lab, but he has now walked through the door. A system breach alarm begins to sound across the whole building. They all realize what this means, and we see another executive head over to investigate. The guard with him points the gun at the alien, saying that he thought he could hit it if Rayner holds still, but is immediately shot by the other executive. He tells us that he had to save it as it was too important, and that Rayner would understand they need the alien alive. The story starts to get very dark as we head to an underground lab. The technician from before has been strapped to a table. A man approaches him saying that he has been declared a terrorist by the government and has no rights under American law. They are essentially about to torture him for information. He tells them that he can't feel anything and is told they've administered temporary spinal blocks to deaden everything from the neck down. They want to know about the church and their plans for the Xenomorphs. Pinter tells them that he is afraid to say anything for fear of being turned into one of them. The surgeon says that the technician is good with his hands, which is why he was going to start with the feet. He asks them what they are doing and we can see his face sweating profusely. The surgeon replies by saying it's what he is doing that they are interested in. They want to know what he saw and who was involved, and and state that they won't hurt him if they get all the information they needed. He then tells Pinto to look in the mirror and notifies him that he won't feel anything until they stop the spinal, after which he will warm up quickly with pain. We return to the Bionational building. They have quarantined and sealed the alien off where it was. The other executive, Ostro, is talking to the body of Raynor through a hovering camera. He tells him that the others may have forgotten his sacrifice, but promises that he remembers and will always remember. He explains that they captured it while it fed on him. He tells them that he didn't die in vain. Ostro explains that Rain would have been thrilled with their progress. They initially planned on studying the specimen while waiting for the KO-14 to return, but seem to have stumbled into a bit of luck. What we then see is that the creature they had captured was actually a queen. She is laying multiple eggs, as Ostro tells us that this changed things. And that is the end of Volume 3 to Aliens Outbreak. Things really picked up in this issue. I hope you guys had fun. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and to subscribe to stay up to date on all my content. We are back into our run into Aliens Outbreak. When we left, a saboteur on board the Benedict had killed one of the Marines who had discovered him sending messages to the KO-14. Led by Massey, a group of mercenaries hired by Bionational plan on retrieving the specimen from the alien homeworld and destroying the Benedict in its entirety. Back on Earth, Bionational had stumbled upon a survivor who they found in space with a facehugger attached. The alien eventually burst out and was captured to reveal that it was actually a queen. We return to find that the queen is laying eggs. The process is described as being parthenogenic, meaning that it is a natural form of asexual reproduction in which the growth and development of embryos occurs without fertilization. We are told that the queen seems to only live to reproduce. The marketing branch of Bionational has told them to hold off on further tests until they can put together a promotional campaign. It is explained to us that even with the secrecy, the company's investment ratings have doubled. Ostro tells us that the organic weapons program is going to revolutionize the industry. They have no idea what they are dealing with here. We get back to the Benedict to see that Newt is looking off into space, viewing some weird wavy distortions. Bueller approaches and tells her that it's an optical illusion. He says that the gravity drive is so powerful that it is bending the light of the stars. He says hello before asking to sit next to her. Another Marine called Ramirez comes up to her and says that Hicks must have thought a lot of Newt if he was willing to stow her away and risk his military career. And Newt tells him that they have an understanding. He replies by saying that he bets they do, suggesting they are having sexual relations. Bueller gets up and attacks him, before telling Ramirez to knock it off. Bueller then shows Newt around the ship. He introduces her to the sleeping quarters and the armory. He hands her one of the blasters, asking if she's ever been around these before. She says once, when she was little. Newt tells us that at first she was unsure what his intentions were, as no one had ever shown interest in her before. But she began to understand that he was like her, in that he was alone. We're beginning to see something developing between the two. Newt tells us that Hicks had given her a schedule of administrative duties to keep her occupied during the voyage. She explains that his hatred of the aliens was burned inside him, like an open flame, and was all that sustained him. Bueller has placed his hands in Newt's when Hicks enters and asks if the private has any business at the station. Newt asks what was wrong with him, and Hicks tells her that he saw what he was doing and that it was going to stop. And Newt walks off, saying that she was not a child anymore. We find that Newt and Bueller have been using an unused storage unit behind the engine compartment to meet up as often as they could. Newt tells him that sometimes she feels frightened, like she was still 8. Bueller tells her that it's nothing to be ashamed of and says that he is frightened by how he feels for her, as we see them kissing. They look out into space, as Newt tells us that the aliens destroyed her life once. She couldn't stop them then, but states that she could stop it from happening again. We return to Pintar, the technician. He appears to have been released after his torture. He was able to deceive them and make them think that it was actually somebody else that was working with Sal. We then see him banging on Salvage's door. A woman opens it and welcomes him in, but he pushes her out of the way and asks, "Where is he?" It is explained that Salvage's vision had tapped into something primal. As his message spread, the devoted sought him out. Pinter opens a curtain to reveal Sal. He tells him that he has seen a real version of the Xenomorph statue he's been worshipping while he was going through the military channels. Sal tells him that they know, as we see that a large congregation has gathered. He tells them what he had seen and noticed that they were all in utter silence and were not surprised. He says it was as if they were expecting him. He then began to understand that the vision had overwhelmed them. Where he was seeing monsters, they were seeing salvation. We return to Bionational. A couple of guards are having a chat while watching the perimeter defenses. One of them notices that the motion sensors have picked up a lady that is walking towards them. The guards speculate whether an executive had forgotten to punch her in. They decide to use a long-range retinal scan, supplemented with a photo ID search. They then begin to pick up movement all over the place. They are about to turn on the automatic defense guns and are distracted by the lady, who unzips her jacket to reveal that she is strapped with explosives. She detonates the bomb, taking a portion of the building with her. The guards inside are armed and ready to engage any trespassers. Pinter tells us that Salvage's congregation had poured into the Bionational complex and that he was stunned by their power. Guns didn't frighten them. Death didn't frighten them. Nothing mattered to them but the cause. We can see the guards opening fire on the horde, but are overwhelmed by the numbers. Pinter tells us that Sal wanted him to see everything. Even in the midst of all the blood and death, he had felt it important that he believed. They enter the lab with the Queen. We are told that she watched them passively, hovering over her children protectively. Salvage approaches her and says that they have come to consummate their love, to purge the visions from their minds and to be one with her. Sal then approaches an egg and asks it to take him. We are told that the smile quickly turned into a scream as the creature attached itself to his face. Pinter tells us that this was the first time that Sal understood the true meaning of sacrifice. Ostro sees the incursion on the monitors and assumes that they are trying to either take her away or destroy her. One of the guards tells him that they are under attack and that they have lost contact with the ground security, who are all dead. He's about to suggest that they notify the police or military to help, but Ostro silences him, saying that they weren't to use outsiders. He grabs a gun and says that they will be handling this in-house. We can see that the acolytes are dragging their infected brethren outside to make room for others. This is insane. Pinter tells us that they were all her children now. Ostro and the guard arrive on the scene. He tells one of the infected that the Queen is his as he shoots his face through the facehugger. The two are shooting everyone that they can as Ostro tells them the life form patterns belong to the company. Pinter informs us that the Queen began to scream at the sight of her children dying. The other guard informs Ostro that there are too many of them to deal with as he sees something approach behind him. We then see the Queen's teeth come out through his head. Ostro looks at her and tells her to understand that they would never hurt her. She uses her tail to smack him to the ground. He gets up and tells her that he loves her and that he only wants the best for her as a facehugger jumps on him from behind. We can see Pintar's face on a monitor as he tells us he doesn't remember much after that. The security police had quarantined the building and found him inside. He starts to realize that he's been a part of the alien's plan all along. He questions whether the alien had controlled every aspect of his life to get him here. A man turns off the display and asks what they did with Pinter. He's essentially told that the organ bank was taking what they could and would burn the rest. It is revealed to us that the fanatics were able to escape and are now in hiding. The two men go over Bionational's data on the aliens and realize they have 72 hours to a week before they begin to gestate. They are worried that one of these embryos will be another queen, which would wreak havoc if allowed to lay eggs out in the open. We return to the Benedict as it makes its approach to the alien homeworld. Newt tells us that as they get close, she was overwhelmed by a hideous premonition of death. Newt and Beulah had spent every spare moment together. There was an air of desperation to their encounters, and they didn't want to waste an instant. We see them get freaky. We arrive to the bridge of the Benedict. Jones has noticed another ship is approaching them. Stevens suggests that it could be debris, but she is adamant that it is changing course and following them. She's about to sound the general alarm as Stevens begins to lift his sidearm. He pulls the trigger and kills her as he says, "Not quite yet." He then contacts Massey on the KO-14 and tells him that everything is set for them to begin docking. Massey says that he will be seeing him shortly as we see the ship ram into the Benedict. The force of this causes the Benedict to reverberate. The alarm sounds, and Bueller tells Newt that they have a Code 5 alert and are under attack. He tells Newt to stay there as it is safe and to wait for him. He lets her know that he loves her and that he will be right back. The rest of the Marines are scrambling, trying to figure out what is going on. They head to the armory only to find that someone has sabotaged their weapons, which are useless now. They are freaking out as Stevens asks the crew to report to the loading bay immediately. When we arrive there, we can see that the whole crew has been incapacitated. Hicks is being restrained and he calls Stevens a traitor. He asks what happened to Easley and if he caught him transmitting a message. Stevens tells him to get off it and that he didn't care about the Marines any more than Stevens. Massey tells Hicks that the Marines are safe for now as they still need an alien specimen. Stevens is shocked to hear that they will be using the Marines as bait. Massey walks over to him and says that he doesn't like him. He says that he doesn't mind his greedy men, but can't stand traitors, even if they are on his side, as you never know when they might turn. Stevens tells him that he needs him, before Massey executes him. He orders his men to prepare the dropships for landing and says that they are going hunting. Newt has been watching the situation play out through the air vents. She tells us that her first instinct was to hide, just as she did on LV-426. She explains that's what the enemy was depending on. She says that human or alien, they rely on our fear to endure. She defiantly says no, as she begins to pull one of the vents open. She tells us that it explained the resilience of the aliens. Newt goes on to say that they don't understand fear, or anything beyond their own existence, and she essentially needed to become like them to survive, as we see her crawling through. And that is the end of Volume 4, The Aliens Outbreak. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and to subscribe to stay up to date on all my content. I'm Niyat with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.